Welcome, everybody, to Circle Back to You. I'm your host, Jason Wilson. Today, we have our former D1 athlete, business coach, Kim Brady. Welcome to the show, Kim.
Thank you so much for having me. How are you today?
I'm doing great. Thank you. So, Kim, in entrepreneurship, everybody talks about all the accolades,
Uh-huh.
everything positive that comes along with entrepreneurship, the money, the free time. And towards the end of your business, if you're willing to sell it, then, they talk about all those good things that come along with that. But nobody
Right.
really talks about the negatives. So you have a program that's phenomenal because it takes you from A to Z, and it also sets you up if you want to sell the business.
Sure. I think we need to look at business ownership in three different stages. You have the startup phase, right? And then you have the building, the growing, the plateauing, the maintaining. You have that phase in the middle where you're just doing the thing and building. And then you have the exit strategy. And when I first went into entrepreneurship, I know you know my story, but maybe not everybody else does. But I have no business being in business. I don't have an MBA. I never studied business, never took any tech classes. Because, P.S., by the way, when I was in college, we didn't have that kind of stuff. We had pagers. Okay. We had pagers. We didn't have cell phones. We didn't have computers in classroom, things like that. So technology was very different. And when I was finishing my degree, I knew with the degree I had that if I was going to be a child psychologist, I needed to go back to school. So I went straight back into school after I graduated and finished my athletic career, and I became a family therapist. And so when people learn, they're like, wow, you've been an entrepreneur for 13 years, but how you started was as a family therapist. There's a whole bunch of other stuff in between. And oftentimes, when people think they want to endeavor into entrepreneurship, there's a lot of fear. And then they hear all these Forbes magazine people, 30 under 30, 40 under 40, multi gazillionaires, and they have all these venture capitalists vying for their money. And then they watch Shark Tank and they have all these things. And they don't necessarily realize that 64% of our workforce comes from small businesses that make less than $2 million in the United States. So, what is this little soccer player, family therapist doing building a business? And ultimately, when I started, it wasn't about venture capitalism and it wasn't about trying to make the next tech thing. It wasn't about any of that. I was miserable in my corporate job. I had stopped being a therapist. I left that career path. I was working with abused and neglected children, and it was very difficult. You're in people's homes, you're in the schools, you're in the behavioral units, you're working alongside police officers. I was a registered social worker for the state of Michigan, and you're in the grind in the hardcore situations with, again, no major cell phones and no weapons to protect you, and all you had was your words to be able to talk people down or to be able to prevent them from being in an abuse or violent situation. And you burn out in that kind of arena, right? And even though you have people skills, you're not making a lot of money when you're a therapist or a social worker. And so I was like, okay, I got to give this up. I don't want to do this anymore. And my parents like, what are you going to do? I'm like, no idea, but I need to get out of Michigan, from Southern California to Michigan, culture shock. And I decided that, okay, I need to learn. I have a people skill. I need to learn how to make money. So I got into corporate sales positions, which is very common for athletes when we retire. I just had 7 years of therapy practice in the middle of mine. And I started working at Enterprise Rent-A-Car alongside 21-year-old, 22-year-old, 23-year-old former college athletes, because Enterprise Rent-A-Car literally goes after college athletes. That's what they do. They have a massive training program. And I felt that I could relate to the athletes in the programs, et cetera. I was like, this works. And so I started getting my sales feet wet in that environment. And then I became a car salesperson. So I was one of the first women to sell cars in the state of Colorado for Enterprise Rent-A-Car. I didn't go through the same path. And the reason why I share the Enterprise Rent-A-Car with people is there's a story full circle of how I sold my business with someone from Enterprise Rent-A-Car. But when I left Enterprise, I was a little disillusioned. I was still missing this team dynamic that I thought I was going to get. I thought I was going to be around athletes where I felt that we were working as a team. Instead, it was this really cutthroat environment. People were stealing deals. People were trying, it was just, I didn't like it. And I ended up leaving that arena and going into an educational recruiter position. started working with trade schools and spoke in 75 high schools to help other students go through a pathway to get them into advanced vocational training for airframe and avionics. So again, I'm using my people skills, but I'm working in an educational system and I'm trying to help students and trying to get that kind of service piece back for myself. And then I didn't like the schedule that I had. I literally was working crazy hours, getting up at 5 a.m, going and speaking in schools till 3, coming home and then calling parents, driving back out to that location to do interviews and not coming home till 10 p.m. at night because you're doing recruiting interviews, very similar to college coaches doing recruiting, right? Where you're really doing recruiting for students. So then I left that and got an opportunity to work for a small business payroll company, meaning they're the largest payroll company in the United States that works with small businesses called Paychecks. And I worked there for about 3 years. And I really struggled underneath the leadership that I was working under. The other team had a leader that a lot of people really respected and liked. And then my leader was someone that kind of did a bait and switch tactic on our team. And the majority of us ended up leaving. I was very disillusioned. And so I spent these 7 years trying to learn skills, trying to replicate this feeling of team and just feeling bummed out and miserable. And my nephew was like, Aunt Kim, what are you doing? You know, I had come home to visit him and I wanted to support him and as his 19-year-old self. What do you want to do, kiddo? Do you want to go to school? Do you want to get a job? What is it you're searching for? And he's like, I don't know if I want to follow what you're telling me to do because you're the one, Aunt Kim, who's followed everything, pursued everything with your education and sport and all these things. And I'm looking at you and you're miserable. And that was my aha moment. And I want to tell people, every person comes into entrepreneurship in a roundabout way, really, unless they literally were born with this entrepreneurial seed a long time ago. And it was this aha moment of I need to walk my talk for the kids, for my nieces and nephews. I'm not happy. I need to find a way to figure it out. And entrepreneurship became an idea in my head because of working with small business owners at that company. And people started planting seeds and they were like, Kim, why aren't you a business owner? You love helping people. Why don't you create something that can help people in our community? Why don't you? Why don't you? And they just started planting the seed. And I said, I have no business background. I don't know how to do this. And they're like, yeah, you do. You have the ability to learn. So there's the other aha moment, right? And then it was like, okay, if I'm going to walk my talk and then I'm going to help my nephew and I can learn, okay, those 3 things make sense. I've had the ability to learn all these new different skills in all these new different arenas. I have the ability to help other people and I know how to create a team. I've coached soccer for, at that time, 13 years, something like that. And I basically said, okay, here's what I want to do. And long story, people kind of can read my book and figure out the full story. But ultimately, I decided to build a residential housekeeping business. And I built that with concepts that I created of what did I really need this for? So many people go into entrepreneurship thinking they're going to make $1 million. They're not. Half of the people go into entrepreneurship have never even made 100 grand. And then you'll see a bunch of people on Instagram and you'll see a bunch of people, oh, woe is me. I only had 400 people come to my event. Poor me. I had 30 of them pay $5,000 for my event. Poor me. And they don't talk to you about the bullshit in the beginning. And so for me, what I like to talk about is what do you have to do when you get the initial spark of, I think I want to build something. And then you have to go through the processes of, what does that look like? Am I going to be married to a brick and mortar? Am I going to bring in employees? If I am, what is that going to look like? How do I want to do this? So I ended up building a location-based, employee-based, or labor-based housekeeping company in Denver, Colorado, that over the course of 10 years, I scaled with employees and built it with the end in mind that ultimately I would have an asset to sell or grow, or if my family wanted it or someone else could purchase it. And over the course, I built my business so where I could actually move home back to Southern California and ran my business absentee from this computer in this kitchen when you first met me back in Denver for 3 full years. So I was literally building my business with the exit plan of me working here, and my business was being run from my computer in Denver from 2017 until I sold it in 2020. And the
Okay,
most common questions that I get are, how the heck do you do that? And so that was why I started doing my business coaching practice. And I interrupted you on your question. What was your question? Sorry.
that's right. So when you started that business, did you have capital, startup
No,
capital?
not really. I had a little bit of money that I had saved, and I mean a very little bit. Working in corporate America and changing jobs, you don't get a lot of 401ks built up. Changing jobs every 2 years and being broker than a joke. There was a time that I was fired from a job for being gay, and I was kicked out of my
Really?
apartment at a restaurant in
Wow.
Denver. And then my roommate kicked me out because she wanted her girlfriend to move in. So I had to find some really crappy apartment in the middle of a crappy place. That apartment ended up being robbed. They stole my computer. Thankfully, my cat was okay. My car was broken into. They stole my stereo. They broke into various other people. It wasn't just me. They were targeting. And so there have been times that I've been broker than a joke and fully bankrupt, literally had to file bankruptcy. I didn't have a lot of money to start my business. And my advisor, had basically told me I needed to figure out something else. So people go into entrepreneurship not to make $1 million. That's a fallacy. They go into it because they're either miserable in their job, they want freedom for their own types of clients or people they want to work with. They want the ability to have more leisure time. They want people to not structure things the same way. They may pursue things that allow them to become financially wealthy, because entrepreneurship is a pathway to become wealthy in this country, contrary to working at corporate America for 30 years. It won't, unless you're one of the top people. You have to have your money work harder than you do. So how are you going to do that? And having an asset is one way to do it. Being a business owner is one way to do it. Being a homeowner is one way to do it. Why not do all three? So if you can build one thing, or such as myself of buying my first home, to make it into something that when I moved home, I made it an asset by renting it out to have income streams, and then being able to invest in my own business by investing in my employees and having leverage and creating an asset that when I stopped working, I could get paid. So if I was working here in California, my employees were working there and I was getting paid. So people have a misconception about what entrepreneurship is. And so what I like to do with people is I have two different pathways, and I know we're going to go into that at a later date, but I have a pathway for the brand new person who's like, what the heck am I going to do? And how do I go about it? And I show them, and we'll talk about this later, I show them in 30, 60, 90 days, how to get a business plan up, how to start getting your mindset right, what vehicle you need to have to do it, and what are these first little sales ideas that we need to try to test and beta test. And then my other platform that we'll talk about also is one where I really hone in on what is happening in that current business owner scenario. If they got hit by a bus tomorrow, would their business run? And if the answer is no, then we have something to talk about. How I can help them with that is what we discuss. And then we work with each other and figure out which pathway is going to work best for them to work with me for 3 months, 6 months, 12 months down the line.
I think that's wonderful. And, for instance, if a person needs a resource, for an example, a CPA, do you have connections to people that you can hook them up with?
Absolutely. There's several people that I think people need to have in their pocket, so to speak, as their internal board of directors. Other business owners, because entrepreneurship is very lonely. And if anyone in your family doesn't know what business ownership is, they're going to be some of your biggest naysayers, and you need people in your corner. You need an insurance person, because you have to carry insurance regardless of what entity you build to protect you and the people you serve. You also need an accountant, and you need an attorney to help you with contracts and services. There are several experts. Just like an athlete needs coaches, trainers, mentors, teammates, etc., we build your business exactly the same way you build a sports team. And the thing that I missed the most was a team. So that's what I built, was creating people around me. And I became the person that they're like, Kim knows a guy. Kim knows a gal that can do A, B, or C, or she'll at least introduce us to someone. I'm not a technical person. You're my video guy. Hi, right? I don't enjoy doing that. You do. I have a website guy. I hate doing them, right? Hey, Ben, will you please do this? And the other piece is I put my clients and collaborators on my website to allow people to see the people that I partner with and work with, because I have a team that I can tap into to help my clients. Because if they're going to financially invest in me, it is an investment to work with a coach. I want them to have access to some of the best people that I know who are vetted, that I've used, because I know a lot of business coaches who've never built a company, never scaled one, and have never sold one. Only 17% of us in the entire United States have started and scaled and sold their own business. And I'm one of those 17%. And so I care tremendously about doing it the right way from the beginning and trying to get people supported. So if you have a little bit of money, we can get started versus having $100,000 in the bank.
Fantastic. So how can people sign up?
Give me a call. I'm free to talk to. We need to have an initial consultation first, because if I'm not a good fit for you, I might know someone who is. But setting it up is very, very simple. Kim at KimBradyBusinessCoaching.com. My website is Kim at Kim Brady. Well, my website is KimBradyBusinessCoaching.com. And you can find me on LinkedIn. It's where I visit the most. And it's just Kim Brady. You can read my stuff and get on a discovery call. 15 minutes, fill out a little bit of information about who you are, what your dreams are, and what you want to do. We'll talk, and then we'll decide whether we move forward.
Kim, thank you so much, ladies and gentlemen. Kim Brady. We will be back again, ladies and gentlemen, because this is the first part of a series of videos that we're going to do. So we will see you again next week. Take care.
Awesome. Thank you.